Right, Ahmed.
Okay,
Well,
I am
thank you again for joining us. Just give us a quick intro. Who are you?
first. I am Ahmet Ustunel. I'm a teacher of the visually impaired in public schools in San Francisco. I mostly work with high school kids, but I have been working with um, kids from ages ages from 3 to 21 during my career. But recently, I have been working with high school kids. I was born and grew up in Turkey, and I am totally blind since the age of 3. In 2006, I moved to San Francisco to study and become a teacher of the visually impaired. And since then, I live in US. Um, I I'm an outdoor enthusiast and also a ceramic artist. I have been kayaking, fishing, swimming, tandem biking, rowing, and doing all kinds of stuff nature offers pretty much all my life. And I became the first blind person to paddle solo from Asia to Europe in 2018.
And that's what as a winner of the Holman Prize, right, out of the lighthouse in San Francisco, you were able to kind of get all the gear and do that cool journey across the Bosporus. That's so
Exactly.
cool, and we might talk about that a little later. But tell me, I guess, what got you interested in becoming a teacher of students with visual impairments? Was this something you kind of thought of as, a teenager? Some people automatically know what they want to be when they grow up. I'm not one of them. But was that for you something that you had in mind from a long time ago?
Well, to me, I think it was the challenges I had during my education. They affected my decision to become a teacher. I first went to school for the blind for elementary school for 5 years. And then after elementary school, I was sent to mainstream for middle school and high school. And I was the only blind student in both schools. And back then, education meant just placing me in a regular classroom with no support, no special ed support, no braille books, no assistive technology. So it was kind of like swim or sink situation. But I was lucky because I had a good education in school for the blind. I knew braille, I knew how to get around by using the cane. I knew how to explain my needs and talk to teacher. I was a good advocate for my needs. But it was very challenging to be the only blind person, only blind student with no support in those middle school and high school environment. Especially at that age, it was very challenging. But I had great teachers. I experienced so many good things. And one of my teachers, um, learned Braille just for me. And by using slate and stylus, which are the most, the oldest way of writing Braille. So, and the most time consuming way of producing Braille. So she learned Braille just to prepare materials for me, handouts and exams. And still today, she's probably one of my biggest inspirations as a teacher. And the challenges, as I said, was probably the biggest influence uh, for me to choose my career. But the actual moment, that moment when I thought, okay, I need to do something in this field, came later when I was in college. I was volunteering at this organization that worked with blind kids, kids around 3 to 5 before elementary school. And I was teaching a class, and after I finished, one of my students' mom came in, and she was surprised to see me as a blind person teaching a class. And she, because most of the classes were taught by sighted people at that organization, So she started asking questions about how I do things, how I get around, how I teach, how, all kinds of stuff. And I realized that she had a lot of worries and she had a lot of anxiety about her kids' future. And we talked for a long time. And I felt like, this person needs some guidance. This person and a lot of other parents need guidance and talk to a blind person, a blind mentor, not just a teacher in the classroom, but a blind adult to tell them everything will be all right and their kids will be successful. And that day, after that day, I started thinking seriously about becoming a teacher and pursue a career in education. And I knew when I was growing up, same thing happened to my mom probably. She had a lot of questions, she had a
Sure.
lot of anxiety, but she didn't know anyone to talk to about those issues.
And now,
So yeah,
yeah, well, that seems to be the moment where you thought that you, having accomplished so much in Turkey, you could further your career and also, help reassure, of course, the parents of blind students, but also the blind students themselves, right? Like you would be a good mentor, a good role model, right? Here in the United States, we're focusing, of course, for the conference on American K-12. How long have you been a teacher of students with visual impairments now?
about 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in these 10 years, what have you noticed? I mean, what are your highlights? What gives you hope for the future of K-12 accessibility? What keeps you up at night? What are those
Yeah,
two things that
a
kind
lot
of...
of things.
Yeah, go for it.
My experience, my experience in education as a student is a lot different than students here. So my first experience as a student was in during my master's degree in San Francisco State, and when I came to SF State, it was kind of like a dream environment for me in terms of accessibility. Uh, for the first time, I was able to get my materials in Braille or whatever format I requested. It is, something very usual, right? I mean, it is how it should be. It's a very normal thing. And a lot of students, college students and high school students in US, they take it for granted. But for me, it was a huge thing. And it was the first time I was able to access my materials in any format I wanted. And also, during that time I was working at the disability office. I was working as an assistive technology tutor, and I realized that they were able to accommodate people with disabilities in all kinds of disabilities. I saw, people in wheelchair. I saw people in using different accommodations, blind, deaf blind, and that was very, that was a moment that was very informative for me. And that's around that time, 2006 to 2009. Um, there was a campus-wide accessibility initiative. We were trying to raise awareness. We were trying to make everything 508 compliant. We were talking to professors, faculty to raise awareness about document accessibility, web accessibility. And that experience was very informative for me, and it created my foundation, my understanding of accessibility and inclusion in higher education. And then I applied that information, that experience to other areas of education, middle school, elementary, and high school as well. And during my career as a teacher, um, again, we have challenges. For the last 50 years or so, disabled people in US have been working hard to push for inclusion in education. So with the 508, Section 508 IDEA and ADA, we achieved a lot in the last 50 years, but we still have a long way to go. And my biggest hope and belief is in the people, disabled people, because we got that far with our effort, and I believe we will be able to move forward with education and other issues we are facing. But when I think about inclusion, as an educator, as a teacher, first thing I think is the inclusion in education. But to me, it's much more than that. I mean, education is a big part of our lives, but after that, people with disabilities, I'm talking about, especially for blind people, we have a really high rate of unemployment, and we don't have equal access to housing, we don't have equal access to transportation, we don't have equal access to a lot of other things like healthcare, recreation, and if we keep organizing like the way we did before in during civil rights, during 60s and 70s and 90s, to get the ADA passed, if we keep organizing, if we keep finding alliances, forging alliances, if we keep changing the attitudes towards disability in general, I think we will be able to see a lot more inclusion in every part of daily life, every section of the daily life.
Well, that makes sense. It's a slow going, slow road, but I guess progress happens that way. Sometimes it does take.
So let's see what
Did
else yeah.
did he? I think you cut off, Anthony, right where you said it's a slow going.
Sorry,
Okay,
am I? Okay, go
no
ahead.
worries,
Go ahead.
no worries. Yeah, so it's a slow moving progress, but in 50 years, we got a lot of things done, and US is ahead of a lot of other countries. So there are people still fighting for basic human rights in a lot of other parts of the world. And I see ourselves in US a lot luckier in terms of accessibility and inclusion compared to other places. And some, as education changes, as what we do in classroom changes, our needs for inclusion also change. Like with the pandemic, we started integrating more and more technology in the classroom. And if it is right, if it is done right, technology is a great equalizer. So it helps our kids to have equal access and very quick access, I should say, to a lot of things, to their books, to their materials. Like I'm going to give you an example about Braille transcription. We still do, but not that much. We used to spend months to transcribe one textbook. It used to take at least 2-3 months to finish a book. But with the technology, with Braille displays and iPads and digital books, we can just start reading a book in a few minutes. Just download, pair your refreshable Braille display with your iPad and start reading the book. So it is very easy and fast process. But not all the technology works well all the time. So whenever I hear from my students, oh, they need to use a new website or they need to use a new app, I get some kind of anxiety attacks. I feel like, okay, is it accessible? How we are going to make this accessible? Because more than 50% of the time, the websites they need to go to research or the apps they need to use are not very accessible. And it creates an extra barrier for a lot of my students to access their curriculum. So that's why we love technology, we use technology, but we want to make it accessible so our kids can have equal access to their curriculum.
That's right. No, it's every time an update happens, even right, you gotta wonder
Exactly,
what
even
may
simple
be broken
updates.
in the what may be broken in the next version. Can you give us a quick highlight of what you'll be talking about during your keynote?
Well, during the keynote, I'll be talking about, I'll share a couple of stories from my childhood, how I used to make things accessible for myself, and how my education helped me to become an advocate for accessibility. And then I will talk about my experience as a teacher and some of the things we do in San Francisco public schools. And I will share a couple of videos of the students when we work on different assistive technology and accessibility related topics. And I will also share some of the best practices from my experience about how to make things accessible for my students.
Very nice. Well, I think we're quite past our time already, but one of the things I want to also draw attention to is that you've accomplished all this educationally. You're also known as the blind captain, right? You have kayaked from the Asia side of the Bosporus to the European side
Right.
in a kayak. Can you tell me really briefly what like adventure and being an outdoors person means to you?
Sure. Yeah, well, I grew up by the ocean, and most of the things, most of the activities I enjoyed when I was a kid was water related, like swimming or going to the beach and fishing and finding different creatures. And then when I moved to US in 2006, I started kayaking, and I really enjoyed it because in a kayak, you're very close to the water and you feel every movement, like currents and the waves and how the boat turns and all that stuff. You're kind of like a sea turtle upside down in a shell, right? So you feel every movement of the kayak. And when I was growing up, my high school was right on the Bosphorus, and I used to sit by the water and listen to the ships passing by. And at that time, in my literature class, we were learning about Greek mythology, and there was this blind king called King Phineas. And his role was guiding the sailors through the Bosphorus in the dark as a blind hero. He was helping all the sailors. And you don't see that many blind characters in real life or in mythology or even in media portrayed as heroes, right? So when I read his story, I was like, wow, there was this blind king and he was doing those cool stuff on the Bosphorus. And I was thinking, maybe one day I could sail a boat or maybe row a boat or maybe, do something on the Bosphorus alone, solo, with no sighted assistance. And back then, when I go fishing with my friends, I used to row a boat, but always somebody used to tell me, oh, go left, go right, all that kind of stuff. So my dream was, okay, one day I will do something solo. But of course, this was in mid 90s, early 90s, and before GPS, before smartphones, before any kind of technology. And then I came to US and I learned about self-driving cars. We even start seeing those on the roads. And I thought, wow, if they can do this in a heavy traffic like San Francisco, it should be much easier on the water because it's all open. You don't need to follow a straight line, like you don't need to be on a street like a car. And the obstacles are less on the water. I mean, what are you gonna run into? Maybe a ship, maybe a couple of rocks. You're not gonna run and cause an accident. So I started thinking about this, and I, talked to people, engineers, and people who know about that stuff. But of course, it was a very expensive and labor-intensive project, and I didn't have the financial means back then. So it was just an idea. And after about 10 years, 11 years, in 2017, I heard about Holman Prize from the Lighthouse for the Blind. And I said, wow, you know, this sounds really cool. They were giving these grants to blind adventurers, explorers, and the grant named after Holman, James Holman, who was a 19th century blind adventurer. He traveled the world alone with no sighted assistant, and he wrote some bestseller books about his travels. But for some reason, he was forgotten after a while. And the Lighthouse was just, you know, using his name in the grant to attract attention to his adventures. And I applied in 2017. I got the grant and I worked on this kayak, kind of like semi-robotic kayak. So I still do the paddling, but I have a bunch of sensors and GPS and navigation systems, talking compass, you know, a lot of electronics on the kayak. And I was able to paddle from Asia to Europe, from one side of the Bosphorus to the other in 2018. It's a symbolic place, you know, it is a geographic border between Asia and Europe. So that's one reason why I chose the place. And another reason is, as I said, it was the home of King Phineas, who was blind and a hero in Greek mythology.
Great. Well, I think for now, I mean, we could talk for a lot longer, right? There's so much we could touch on, but I think for now, just maybe one last thought here. Maybe you could just share with our viewers and listeners why they should attend our accessibility conference next in 2 weeks.
Well.
Make a pitch for your keynote and also for the conference.
All right. Well, accessibility is for everyone. When we say accessibility, we always first thing we think is the people with disabilities. But to me, accessibility is a lot more than that. You know, a lot of things start with people with disability. A lot of accessibility initiatives start with the disabled people in mind, like putting ramps in buildings, right? So wheelchair users can use it, but I mean, it's good for everyone. Or let's say texting. Text messaging was actually used by deaf people before it became a widely used communication system, and now everyone using it. Or I can give you a whole bunch of other examples, like you know, the audio traffic signals. People used to think that it's only for blind people, but it's great for everyone else. In these days, we don't pay that much attention. People are looking at their phones. People are paying attention to millions of other things. And just having an extra audio reminder is always good. So when I think about accessibility, it is for everyone. And this conference, I think, will be great to learn from the experts what is being done, what is new in web accessibility, in document accessibility, accessibility in general. And I'm very excited to be part of it, and I'm looking forward to learn more from the experts. I am not an expert, as I should say, I'm not an expert in terms of regulations, in terms of codes or rules, but as most blind people, I have a passion for things work and things work well, and that is my focus. So I love to use technology that is designed with all kinds of users in mind, including people with disabilities. and that that's a good experience for everyone, not just for me, not just for anybody with disability.
Knowbility logo, text reads, the K12 Access Summit, bringing digital equity to education. Go to knowbility.org/K12 Access.